Most men assume that long relationships depend on emotional depth, connection, loyalty, affection. They're not wrong, but they're also not looking at the structure beneath it. And without that structure, emotional depth doesn't hold weight. It just floats. The frame matters more than people admit, not because it's authoritarian, because it removes ambiguity. A relationship without a defined frame operates on constantly shifting expectations. And constantly shifting expectations create constant low-level tension. That tension doesn't announce itself. It accumulates quietly until someone realizes they've been negotiating terms they didn't know existed. When I say frame, I mean the set of boundaries that determine how decisions get made, how conflicts resolve, and what behavior crosses into unacceptable territory. Someone has to establish that. And in most cases, when the man establishes it, the relationship stabilizes faster. Not because women lack agency, because decision-making responsibility is a cognitive load. And when one person consistently carries that load, the other person experiences relief, not oppression. This isn't about obedience, it's about division of labor in the psychological sense. If a woman constantly has to assert her boundaries, make executive decisions, and calibrate the relationship's direction, she's operating in what I'd call command mode. That mode is exhausting. It also tends to reduce attraction, not because women dislike capable men, because they stop feeling like they can relax. And when a woman can't relax, she starts to feel like the relationship is another job. There's a specific dynamic I've observed repeatedly. Men think they're being considerate by deferring to a woman's preferences on everything: what movie to watch, where to eat, what to do this weekend. Over time, this creates a strange resentment. The woman begins to feel like she's managing a passenger, not partnering with someone who has direction. And the man begins to feel like nothing he suggests matters. Both people end up frustrated, but neither can pinpoint why. The solution isn't dominance. It's decisiveness paired with awareness. A man who makes decisions but ignores his partner's legitimate boundaries will eventually trigger resistance. A man who never makes decisions will eventually trigger disinterest. The functional middle ground is this: the man sets the direction, and the woman course corrects when the direction conflicts with her non-negotiable limits. Both people have boundaries, but only one person is expected to lead by default. This is where people usually object. They say, that's outdated, regressive, oppressive. But watch what happens when the opposite structure is in place. When a woman is forced to take the leadership role because the man won't, she doesn't feel empowered. She feels burdened. And the relationship doesn't feel like a partnership. It feels like she's dragging someone along. That's not a feminist outcome. That's just exhaustion wearing a different label. Now let's talk about the second part: hypergamy. Most people hear that word and think it only means women seeking men with more money. That's reductive. Hypergamy in the context of relationships isn't just about wealth. It's about experience, competence, social intelligence, and the ability to navigate complexity. A woman isn't just looking for someone richer. She's looking for someone who has already figured out things she hasn't had to figure out yet. That gap matters. Age difference reflects this. Not because older automatically means better, because time creates pattern recognition. A man who's 5 or 6 years older has, in most cases, already cycled through mistakes a younger man is still making. He's already learned what works in conflict. He's already figured out what doesn't work when attraction starts to fade. That learning curve is steep, and most men take longer to climb it than women do. A woman can extract relational lessons from one relationship. A man often needs 3 or 4 before the same lesson registers. I don't know why that gap exists, but I've seen it enough to stop questioning it. So when a man is slightly older, and when that age gap corresponds with a real experience gap, the woman tends to trust his judgment more, not because she's submissive, because she recognizes that he's already been where she is now, and that recognition reduces the need to question every decision. It also reduces the adversarial energy that builds up when both people are operating from the same level of inexperience and both believe they know better. Here's where people panic. They assume hypergamy means a woman will always leave for someone better. That's not how it works in practice. Hypergamy is a selection pressure, not an ongoing replacement mechanism. Once a relationship has depth, once there's shared history, emotional investment, children, intertwined routines, the cost of starting over becomes prohibitively high. A woman's sexual market value shifts with age, fertility declines. The prospect of re entering the dating market after years of stability feels less like opportunity and more like chaos. The idea that women are constantly scanning for upgrades ignores the weight of attachment, the friction of change, and the reality that better isn't always better when you factor in the effort required to rebuild. The same applies to men, obviously, but men tend to underestimate how much women value continuity once it's established. A woman who's built a life with someone isn't going to discard it lightly just because someone wealthier or more attractive appears. The attachment already exists. The routines already work. The relationship already has a rhythm. Breaking that rhythm is costly, and most people avoid high-cost decisions unless the current situation becomes unbearable. This is also why the admiration component matters. A woman's attraction isn't just physical or emotional. Part of it is intellectual respect. When she looks at a man and thinks, I wouldn't have solved that the way he did, but his solution actually worked, that creates a form of respect that sustains attraction over time. It's not worship. It's recognition of competence. And competence, real, demonstrated competence, creates a stabilizing effect. She's less likely to second-guess decisions when she's already seen him solve problems effectively. He's more likely to make sound decisions when he's not constantly defending them against skepticism. That's the functional logic behind the age gap and the experience gap. It's not about control, it's about reducing friction. When one person has already navigated certain challenges and the other hasn't, the person who hasn't tends to defer, not out of weakness, out of efficiency. Why reinvent the wheel when someone already knows how it turns? But there's a limit. If the gap is too wide, 10 years or more, you start hitting generational differences that create their own friction. A man born in 1990 and a woman born in 2000 are operating from different cultural baselines, different media references, different formative experiences. That gap doesn't always matter, but it shows up in unpredictable ways. Small misunderstandings accumulate. Inside jokes don't land. The rhythm feels slightly off, even when nothing is explicitly wrong. So there's a functional range. 5 to 7 years works. 10 starts to stretch it. 15 is almost certainly a different kind of relationship. None of this works if the man isn't actually competent. If he's older but hasn't learned anything, the age gap just becomes a liability. The woman recognizes quickly that he's not leading from experience. He's just occupying space. And once that recognition happens, the frame collapses. She stops deferring. He stops leading. The relationship flattens into a negotiation with no clear terms. That's when people start talking about compatibility issues. But it's not compatibility. It's structural failure. And here's the part people don't say clearly enough. This structure benefits both people. The man gets to operate from a position of clarity. The woman gets to operate from a position of trust. Both of those states reduce the background anxiety that kills long relationships. Anxiety isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just a constant low hum of, is this working? Should I be worried? Is this heading somewhere? When the frame is clear, that hum disappears. Not because problems disappear, because both people know how problems get addressed. Love, respect, loyalty, those matter. But they don't create structure. They fill it. And without structure, they diffuse. A relationship where both people love each other, but neither knows who decides what will eventually feel shapeless. Shapeless things don't last. They drift. This isn't a prescription, it's a pattern. And like all patterns, it works until it doesn't. But when it works because both people understand their role without having to constantly renegotiate it. That understanding is what makes long relationships possible. Not certainty, not passion, just clarity about how decisions happen and who carries the weight when things get complicated. That's where the frame does its work, quietly, structurally, without requiring daily justification. And that's also where hypergamy stops being a threat. Because once the structure is in place, once the attachment is real, once the cost of leaving exceeds the cost of staying, the question isn't, is there someone better? The question becomes, why would I start over? And most of the time, there's no good answer to that.